Peace and grand rising to the sovereign, original, indigenous, natural, divine heirs. Today is December the 23rd, 1442 on the ancient moon calendar and 1441 on the ancient sun calendar, and 2021 on the civilian or civil calendar. All rise and stand. This is a sovereign, living, ancient Article 3, Al-Moroccan, Moorish American, consular court action. I am sovereign, living justice, and as are all Moors are sovereign, living justice in capitis, diminutio, nolo, in red ink, in propria persona sui juris, in proprio solo, and in proprio heredes. Our free, chosen, sovereign appellations are also in capitis, diminutio, nolo, in red ink, in propria persona sui juris, in proprio solo, and in proprio heredes. We are the ascendants of the ancient pharaohs of Kemet and of the ancient Moabites and Canaanites. We are hereby exercising all sovereign rights at this time and at all points in time. No, so sunk. So when it comes to our topic today, we're going to kind of morph through topics. We want to start off talking about how unity is expressed in order to access resources. When it comes to resources, wealth, banking, structures, buildings, whatever it is, grocery stores, food, all of that, the way for us to access any of those resources is we must first be unified. Okay, now what does unity look like? Unity does not look the way we thought it looked or the way that we've been programmed for it to look. When we were programmed, it was supposed to be where everybody was hugging everybody and all of that. And to many, or to the way that we were programmed, that was unity. But that didn't get a whole lot done. It kept us close, but it didn't get a whole lot done. And so unity is supposed to accomplish things. That's why we come together. We're already unified from ancient times by bloodline and birthright, but now we have to express that so that we can continue accessing the fullness of our vast estate. What does that look like? Our most effective unity when it comes to the resources is expressed on paper, because it's the paper that has been used to administer the resources. And when I say administer in this format means to not minister unless you use two D's, unless you spell it differently. But the United States Corporation Company that was calling itself the government was pretending to govern, and they called themselves an administration. Why is that? Because they were not to minister the estate to the heirs. The heirs, because they don't have the authority to. The heirs have to do it. What did they use? Paper. Before any guns showed up, before any policy enforcers showed up, before the military showed up, they always used paper first. First, it would be affidavits. Then it would be private commercial paper, which they called money, which is not money. Their money is not money. It's Federal Reserve debt notes. And then all of the other madness came in. So that's the same formula that they use everywhere they go. So we have to use the same formula, except we don't even ever have to get to the guns when the paper is right, because the guns are not going to help anything. It's the paper that has to be right. What do I mean by paper? Our affidavits have to look like they should. What does that look like? In capitis, diminutio, in red ink. I'm watching it unfold before before our very eyes, we're all watching it unfold. That when the documents are done correctly and competently, that no one can rebut that. So unity is when we speak to a resource. Let's just say we wanted to speak to the bank. Number one, we must be unified to even make that effective. Unity on paper is all of our documents looking the same. We're doing a great job of that thus far because there are so many of us using Moorish government letterhead in red and all lowercase letters. That is what is causing the breakdown of anything that would stop us from accessing the vast estate. Some may not agree with that, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with that. We know what we're seeing. So where accessing of the vast estate is concerned and our unity is concerned, when we all use the same documents, or at least the same structure of documents, in other words, we're putting forth our estate the same way. That means that we're all presenting the same estate. And it looks the same on paper so that whenever they see the Moorish National Republic federal government documents come through with the Empire State of Morocco at the top of it, in red and all lowercase letters, then they know that, okay, these Moors know that we've been using capitalism to administer or not minister the estate, and now they realize that, so now they're taking control of their own estate by stepping outside of capitalism, which we were never really in it when it comes to them, to the corporate structure. So for some Moors, it's good news that we don't all have to be hugging everybody every day and every night in order for unity to be proclaimed, in order for unity to be shown. Because some are not that way yet, or that way at all. Others of us are huggers and things like that. But again, the unity happens on the paper. Because guess what? Corporations only exist on paper. We exist in the flesh, in this 3D dimension, and so does the paper for us. We can actually touch our affidavit, and that is why we put raised seals, embossed seals on our documents, because these are living documents. That's why we put the red blood, the symbol for the blood, the red thumbprint. So again, unity is always expressed most effectively when all of us use the same documentation. In other words, the same letterhead. Now, on your affidavits, you can say whatever you want to say. You can edit them. You can construct them however you want to construct them. But using the same letterhead has been our strong point thus far. That shows that we're unified. That means we're speaking with one voice, and we know we're the government, and we are the state. Now, when I say we're the state, the Empire State of Morocco is all over the earth. Wherever there is a Moor, you're looking at the state. What is the state? The state is the estate of the Moors. So now, when we're speaking about the resources, we speak by affidavit. We've always said that. And having said that, as we're continuing to, now we've already put it on the public record that we've done, according to international law, we have fulfilled all of the mandate, as it were, for statehood. Okay, So we've already done all of those things. They're done, and they're on the public record. We are the state. We are the Empire State of Morocco. And of is spelled O-V and not O-F. Okay? But even if some were to mistakenly put that on there, it's in red and all lowercase letters still. So having said that, that brings me to our liens and the effectiveness and getting things done with regard to those. Everything that we do must be done as fiduciaries for our state. And the United States Corporation Company, they did not get not 1 inch of property without first putting forth a quote-unquote corporate state. Everything that they did, they did it, presumably did it by way of the state, their corporate state, the dead state, really. And with the living state that we are, all of the protections that we have ever wanted are encapsulated within our state. What are those protections? The protections is the Constitution, which we are aligned with. We're not under it. We're aligned with it. And our state, initially since time immemorial, wrote every constitution out there. We wrote it first. The original indigenous Moors wrote the law first in all jurisdictions, living jurisdictions. So, for example, here at, or actually in any of the territories, before the Moors decided to once again proclaim that we are the state and do the things and unify and come together to put that on the public record competently, which we've done, before that time, we could see the fraudulent, dead corporate state doing things as far as property is concerned. And the one caveat that they always use is the real estate is not speaking. The real estate has not spoken. Therefore, no one else can claim those things. Okay? So we here in this territory, there was a story that ran in the news, and that story was talking about how a group of quote-unquote attorneys wanted to claim a landmark building. So what did they use? They used, and I'll put it on the screen, they used the Fifth Amendment to do so. So let me pull that up on the screen. The Fifth Amendment, and so that we can look at it and see how it is that they've been claiming property when the properties belong to the Moors. Okay? So now, on the screen, the Fifth Amendment is what they were using. And what they said on the news, just bold, on the news, they were saying that this group of quote-unquote attorneys told the city to release control of the building, release control of it, because the real heirs have not stepped up. And they didn't say the real heirs hadn't stepped up. They just said, we're using the Fifth Amendment, and we're telling the city to release control of it. And the city, quote-unquote city, presumably released control of the building, and they were saying that they were going to take it over using the Fifth Amendment. What does the Fifth Amendment say? Right here on the screen. It says, No person shall be held to answer for a capital, and we've talked about capitalization and capital letters and those being the reason why they hold people is because of the way the documents are written, and that we kept assuming the identity of a corpse. A corpse is something put in capital letters. We know that. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And that last couple of sentences there is what they were using to take the property. What they were saying was that first they had to use capitalization. Okay, so these attorneys put all of their documents in all capital letters, and they spoke to the corporate city in capital letters as well. And then they said, even though this says that none of these things can happen, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, that doesn't mean that that corpses and corporations cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property. It says it can't happen without due process of law. What does that mean? That means that our courts, because we're the law, do have the authority to competently use the Fifth Amendment to get the property. It says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. The problem that we had, Morris, is that part right there, the just compensation. We can't even compensate at all if we didn't have our own money. Now, and I can hear it. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Why are we compensating people when the land is already ours? Are we really doing that when we can print our own money? Or are we just doing a competent exchange? We've always been known as fair and just on our land. We've always been known as fair and just. Even though it's ours, we still use due process to gain that which is already ours and to possess it. We can't even get due process if we didn't have our own court. Due process for living heirs does not exist in a corpse court. In an inferior court, you may get some relief, but that's with a superior court over them, which is the Moors. So we've done some demonstrations here lately where we've taken possession of some things. And we're using this, and there are a couple of other laws that we're using. Another law that we have put into use with regard to property, and I'll say this, property is everything from subjects to bank accounts, to the wiring that, or wireless, the air, the land, the sea, all of that is still property. The natural resources, that's property too, all of it. Due process We must use due process, and it has to be competent due process. It has to come from our Article 3 court, and our documents do the speaking. They show whether we're, not whether we're competent or not, they show how competent we are, because we're all competent, just at varying degrees. You know, I might be a 77th degree, but then our teachers are 720 degrees, or, you know, and that's just an example of and then some of you might be 130 degrees or 640 degrees with the Masonic or mother-son knowledge. It just depends on our studies, and no one can make that determination except us. You know, we're the ones who can do that. And that's done through our demonstrations. So another part of the Constitution that we use in order to, that we've put with this Fifth Amendment, where property is concerned, is let me go to my document here. Article 4, Section 1. Now, we talked about the states, okay? We talked about the states and statehood. Statehood is so important. You cannot get any, property cannot be taken unless you are a state or the state, because all states, and we've talked about this in the past, all states, who is it within that state structure, that state government structure, who is it that was claiming to be the custodian of all abandoned property? It was the Secretary of State. That's a hint right there that you have to be a state to even take possession of any property. And then what happens with all the property that's in your state? Your state nationals go into those properties, and they, you know, and then what happens? There are some citizens in your state too. And the citizens reside in the property. It has everything to do with statehood, which is unity. And again, statehood is properly conveyed on paper first, and then in what we do. And it will convey on the paper when we're already being the state. Okay? So, well, let me go back here to Article 4, Section 1, where this, here we are at Article 4, Section 1. And then we'll go back to the other one that we just came from, because I want to point something out there as well. Article 4, Section 1. It says, because see, we've been reading these things, but we need to expand on them more. We need to look at each word and make sure that we understand what each one of those words means and how it's connected to the words before it and the words after it, and then any connecting laws that we have put forth as a nation. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. In the past, when we were doing demonstrations, you know, some years back, we were doing those demonstrations as just, you know, a Moor who you know, knows who they are and wants to do a demonstration because we need a domicile or a building or a conveyance or, you know, some freedom of some kind. All of those things happen by way of the state. We don't even have to say our appellation in order to gain the things that we gain, in order to access the vast estate. All we have to do is say, all Moors are right here with us. That's what statehood is all about. Each state. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the actions of every other state. Now, the public acts. Let's look at the word public. What is a public act? That's something that's on the public record by the state. Remember, we've done public actions. Actions happen in a courtroom. Where's the courtroom? The courtroom is wherever the Moors are. Okay? And this first sentence is important because the word "and" is in this sentence twice. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. It doesn't say or. It doesn't say that full faith and credit shall be given to the public acts, records, or judicial proceedings of every other state. It says and. What does that mean? That means that with the action, there must accompany that, a record must be with that. The record must be a public act that is properly recorded publicly, and a judicial proceeding must be with that. So there must be something done by the public. The public is the state. The public is the people. And what's the first sentence of the Constitution's preamble? We the people. So some have been trying to claim full faith and credit by themselves. That's not how this works. It has to be the act of the people, and not only, because our courts are all courts of record. That's why we put everything out there. Because see, when we first started this, I knew there was something to it when we first started this, because there was a couple, one or two, creeping out of those bushes saying, why are you putting that out there on the public record? Some of that stuff don't need to be out there. Oh, yes, it does. If full faith and credit is to be given, and who's giving it? We're the only ones who have it to give. But we have to have it in ourselves first, in our state, which is one another. So it says full faith and credit shall be given in each state. Well, let's just put this on the public record. The United States Corporation Company is not a valid state, not like that. They are actually a part of our state. How are they a part of our state? Not the corpse one, not the dead one, but the one that is subject to the Moors. There's a difference. The dead one is the one that we had to say, hey, all rise and stand. Rise from the dead. All dead. The dead in Christ shall rise. Everyone rise. Because, see, they've been doing that same thing, haven't they, in their court? They've been saying, all rise, and everybody jumps up, and this thing with a black robe on starts yakking and talking. Well, you don't get full faith and credit in a graveyard. It just does not exist there. So then, full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts or actions, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. When all of our documents look the same, that's a public act. It's also a record. And when we put that court action language at the top, it's a judicial proceeding. It must be honored. It has to be honored. Why? Because our judiciary, the judicial branch of our state is valid. What makes it valid? It's underwritten by gold. We have our own economy, our own financial system. That's one of the because all judges are bankers, we know that. But what type of currency is being used? Is it a dead currency or is it a living currency? Only the heirs can produce a living currency. So our affidavits, there is no, and again, when our affidavits are capitalized by us and not by a court, they must be honored by every other state. Each state must honor it. Every other state, and some people may consider the subjects of state. Well, that's still every other state. We don't consider them a separate state. They're subjects. They're citizens. Living subjects. It says, and the Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. What have we been doing on our calls? We have been voting. We've been doing judicial banking. We've been prescribing the manner in which our actions, our proceedings, and our records are to be proved and the effect thereof in alignment with the Constitution for the United States and the treaties thereof. So let's go back now to the initial, where we were at first, which is Amendment 5. Right here in this little corner, hopefully you can see this on the screen. Let me just make sure. Yes, okay. Right there in the corner, they're telling you what's going on in Amendment 5. The Fifth Amendment talks about grand jury, double jeopardy, self-incrimination, due process, and what is this word right here? Taking. How do you take something without, how do you take it peacefully? Because see, we don't have to get violent. We don't need guns and military to do this, to unify on paper and then take something. Taking. That's how things are taken. And without proper rebuttal more, doors are kicked in, conveyances are towed away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we don't even have to wait to rebut that stuff. We can rebut it before any of that ever happens. But we have to know how to do that competently. How is that done competently? In red and all lowercase letters. Some don't, hey, we've proven that. All of us autograph our name change and appellation change and judicial proclamation in red ink. That's it. That's our teachers were absolutely correct as usual. And we're just taking it even further, looking at what they did and tearing and pulling it apart and peeling that onion, because it's a beautiful onion, peeling it and looking at each and every part of it, down to dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's. That's the science of the writing. That's the science of writing. because writing there's a science to everything we do. So some may say that it doesn't matter, but that's a science. Writing that's how we expressed ourselves when we started dealing with one another and subjects and using language to do so. We wrote everything down a certain way and expressed it a certain way. Now, all of the other ways of writing belong to us too. So let's make that clear. Okay, so the Fifth Amendment is talking about taking stuff. So let's go there, back to the Fifth Amendment, and let's put a little bit of emphasis on the exception to the rule. When can capitalism be used by the heirs in our sovereign state? Because some have been wanting to, quote unquote, capture the straw man, which you cannot do. Islam in the chat. Justice almost said it's a republic form of government, not a democracy. They have hypothecated the word democracy also. Because, see, democracy in all lowercase letters means that it's by the people. It's by the people. And so here, when it talks about by the people means the state. What is state? That's when the people stand together. It can't just be random people going around doing their own thing. We do that after we do the state. And all of our documents and everything and we're speaking with one voice. Then we can go around and do whatever we want to do because we've put the foundation there on top of the foundation that our ancestors and our teachers have put there. Okay. So it says here, it talks about no person except in cases arising in the land or naval forces. The land is a force. The Navy is a force, or in the militia. When in actual service in time of war, which, again, how many times have we said we're not at war? We're not. But there could be a quote-unquote public danger if we're answering to capitalism done by others instead of us being in complete control of all the letters and the ink. Now, some may not think that that's important, but you know what? When you look at the way these foreigners write things, they pay close attention to capitalization because they know what it means. And when you go back to the Library of Congress records and you see how many different iterations of the Constitution of each article and amendment they did, where they changed, the words were the same, but they would change the capitalization of certain words because they knew what that meant. They knew what that meant. They know what capital letters mean, and they know if we don't know the difference, then they'll start labeling things, labeling the living as a person, which we're not persons, and then they'll have us being held to answer for a capital. And that actually is a crime. That's why they kept throwing us in jail whenever we did it. That's a crime. Because even now that we have taken control of the lettering and the ink, and whether it be uppercase or lowercase, doesn't even matter when it's issued by the Empire State of Morocco, then we're the fiduciaries of all of that. That's what puts it on the land. And then the red ink. Red is the land jurisdiction. Now, where can you find all of that written? Capitalization and capitation being a tax is in the Constitution. But you can also find it in older writing style manuals where they talk about the tone of the writing and what capital letters mean, where capital letters are either when issued by whoever is issuing it, that capital letter takes on the nature of whoever's issuing it. If it's issued by the United States Corporation Company, the dead one in black ink and in brackets, then it's a dead court. When capital letters and black and it's not even black ink, monochrome ink is issued by the heirs, then we're the fiduciaries of that. That's just another utility, a credit conveying utility, a credit transmitting utility, instead of a debtor transmitting utility. And those who study universal commercial codes and uniform commercial codes and liens know about debtor transmitting utilities. So cases or causes arising in the land that when in actual service in time of war or public danger. War means confusion. We're not confused. War means confusion. So what did we do in order to ensure that number one, we stay on the land, and even if we venture out, because we're navigators, we navigate the waters too. We are also a militia whenever we're ready to be one. In order that due process and life, liberty, or property is in its proper place, and that we are not deprived of said, then these things about being on the land, it has to be properly adjudicated. This is all about the law and adjudication of said law. And then they're talking about private property be taken for public use without just compensation. The first thing that I have always heard whenever we would go out and start looking at things, you know, we were going out through the estate at one point, me and one of the other empresses here at the territory, and we went on to a property where we saw, you know, we were seeing some signs of the ancient markers. And the first thing that was said to that a hybrid said, because they can't talk to us because they were dead at the time. We had not risen them from the dead yet. First thing they said was, "You can't be on here. This is private property. Don't you see that private property sign?" Well, all they're doing is pointing to the Constitution. They're saying, "Are you the state? Because if you're not the state, you can't be on here." Okay. We are the state. Cases arising in the land. And then they can't even be on the land unless we bring them on the land. And how do we do that? By being in our proper status. That's how we do it. By being in our proper status and knowing the law. Knowing what's being said here about property. And it doesn't matter whether it's being called private or public property. Ultimately, all property is sovereign property when the heirs, the Empire State of Morocco says so, okay? And we say that about all property. And then we go about competently speaking with one voice, a unified voice on paper. Now, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense. Let's break those sentences down, because you can't the only way to be a subject is to let someone else capitalize you and hold you for a capital. Our subjects want us to protect them that way because they know we are fair and just. They don't want to be under a corporation court. So it's our duty and responsibility as the creators to do that. Now, there's a law that I want to bring forth here that has been used and quoted everywhere in the undercurrent. That we, now in the Pope's letter in 2014, 2013 and 2014, the Pope's letter to Barack Obama, the civil letter, the Pope mentioned United States of America major and minor, okay? Because again, we're still talking about capitalization, capital letters, and claims, property claims, court actions, etc. With lettering, the bigger the letter, the more of a minor is being presented there. The lowercase letters are the majors. Okay? So I want to bring forth a law, and we'll look at the, let's look at the, just one moment, let me pull it up here. Let's look at the, okay. I want to bring forth this law here. It's a law because we say it's a law, but it's not a law when it's as we're reading it here. It's just an act here. But when we put it on in its proper context and on government letterhead and with proper capitalization, it is then. Let's see. Okay. Now, this is the quote-unquote Social Security, and if you'll see, they changed their logo to here on this part. It's changed to in capitis diminutio minima in white letters right here. Okay. Let me go back. So now, this is what they've been using in order to do the things that they've been doing. We know that they are the United States of America minor. And again, referring back to the Pope's civil letter of 2013 and 2014 and 2015, because we've seen different iterations of that. We are the majors. We're not minors. Minors being those who are not capable of governing their own affairs because they've not reached the age of majority. We've reached majority. Okay? Statehood says we've reached majority. So they've been using this right here, Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. Now, they're transferring things to minors because they're minors. And that's the only way is to hypothecate this and subrogate and then start doing things because no one rebutted it. No one rebutted it. And when I say no one rebutted it, I'm not negating any of the work that's been done over the years, to include all the way back to our prophet and our ancestors before our prophet. But this that we're doing is a test for all of us in this generation here, in this age that we're in now. So when we say that, we're talking about us, all of us. And fortunately, there are many, many, many more who are now rebutting properly these things that are here. The Uniform Transfers to Minors Act tells them the way that they were using it was that they were transferring everything to themselves and saying that they're the custodians of that and that everything was transferred to them. Okay? That's the undercurrent. However, they were saying that we were all minors and they were the custodians. Okay? We're minor, that's what they were saying. And we just needed to properly rebut that, which we have. We're not minors. We're the majority. So with this right here, it talks about any kind of property, real or personal, tangible or intangible. That's important because they're now talking about the spirit realm when you're talking about intangible property. And they're also talking about intellectual property, etc. It says here can be transferred to a custodian for the benefit of a minor. Well, it says under UGMA, only gifts of cash or securities are permitted. What is cash and security? What are securities? And what is cash? Securities is lien, court actions. Back to that Fourth Amendment where it talks about acts, recordings, and judicial proceedings. All of the paper that's written on is securities, all of it. Because again, all justices, which is the Moors, are bankers too. So it says the UTMA covers not only outright gifts. Outright gifts. If I give you an airplane and a spaceship, that's an outright gift. But it also other transfers such as payments. Well, now you're talking about banking for sure. You're talking about the SWIFT system. You're talking about the lines in which the ones and zeros are conveyed. Cash App, any of these other payments, PayPal, bank accounts, electronic funds transfers. Now you're talking about all of that too as a transfer. And it's even talking here about transfers of property from trust or estate. Who has the estate? The Moors do. So what did we do to provide some remedy in these areas for us, for all Moors who declare it and who assent and who present themselves? We rewrote this Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, and it became for us the universal transfers for minors, because you can't transfer to a minor something that a custodian has where the minor is not competent to govern what you transfer to them. So we have placed this in alignment and addition to and side by side with the Fourth Amendment, Section 1, and Article, let me just make sure, the Fifth Amendment, and also Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution, and the whole Constitution also. So we rewrote it, and I'll put it on the screen, because this is this rewriting of it is one of the things that we use to take a bank account. Bank accounts can be taken with affidavits. And once acceptance is gained, and acceptance is just deliver it, notify. And when you notify, if you can get a signature from one of the subjects, get a signature. We got the subject to initial in blue on our document. Okay? So this universal transfers to minors. Let's put it on the screen. The way that we rewrote it. Because again, we have to rebut what they've been saying, or else they keep attempting to use it in a manner that is not meant to be used. Okay? So, universal transfers for minors law. Now, this is us also taking care of not just the subject, but did you know that all of the creditor conveyance utilities that have been being used, such as, let's say there's a bank account that has Pauline Denise Ritchie on it, that is considered a minor. Any account, there has to be, that is a minor. Not only is it a minor, it's also a ward of the state. Well, who's the state? The ward. That's how you take a bank account. Is the state takes it. The Empire State of Morocco takes it. And it becomes a ward of our state, and then we do with it as we please. We put into it what we want to put in it. We take out what we want to take out. And it's by our affidavits that things go in and out and are moved, because again, that is a public act, record, and judicial proceeding. That's how you take it. You don't need permission. We just had to put it on the public record and do the things that it took to become the state. And we've shown that. We've done a video on that. Anyone needing to see that video about the things that were needed according to universal law, actually, international law specifically, but universal law as well, to proclaim statehood. And then there was a certain number of us who were in agreement together. And we stand together today. So the universal transfers for minors law. Irrevocable transfers of all property for all minors to the sovereign living ancient Empire State of Morocco is hereby the law and proclaimed by the Empire State of Morocco fiduciary, nunc pro tunc, in alignment with universal, divine, natural, and state law, and for the benefit of the minor beneficiaries and in the best interest of the minors until such time as said minors have reached the age of majority. This sovereign universal transfer is activated since time immemorial into perpetuity, not protunct without limitation on the value, amount, quantity, size, or composition of the transfer. This sovereign living affidavit is the eternal written receipt and affirmation of delivery of said transfers. Said transfers are not taxed. Proper state identification is commanded. So, as a part of, when you look further into this law, where transfers for minors are concerned, it talks about having a receipt. You have to have a receipt. You must provide a receipt. Well, who provides the receipt? The state does. That delivery has been made. So then we just do like they've been doing. Whenever they say that, you know, whenever they claim to have taken a domicile, they didn't send a tow truck to tow the domicile away and then say we have possession of it. They didn't post people outside of it with guns. They used paper. They used paper. So that's what we've done, is using our sovereign affidavit to do the same. And then we put that universal transfers for minors law, and then Amendment 5 of the Constitution, where capitalization and the taking of property is concerned. And then we also put Article 4, Section 1, where full faith and credit is concerned. And then we added, and we talked about this recently, where we added Article 9 of the Universal Commercial Code 1. Article 9, at secure transactions, right of possession. And when we delivered the documents and we hand delivered them, we got an autograph from the banking subjects, and then we gave some commands in those things, and the commands were followed up to a particular point. In other words, up to the point where they could follow them. Okay. Then after that, it's like, okay, we did everything you told us to do. Now what do you do? It's your move on the chessboard. So we made another competent move on the chessboard. And what does that move look like? It looks like the same way that it did when many of us were in the corporate world, which brings me to a question that I wanted to put forth for us to think about. Now, most of us have worked in the corporate sector in one position or place or another. So I'm talking about our response and our move that we made in order to ensure that what we said was in the account was in there. The question that I want to put forth for us to think about is this. When a corporation, let's think back to when we were in our sleep and a corporation, you know, we're in this corporate, let's just say we're in a corporate accounting department. When a corporation does its banking, does the bank tell the corporation how much is in its account? Or does the corporation provide a bunch of documents that say this is what's in our account? Think about that, because I'd love to hear a response to that. If anyone has worked in the corporate arena, and you can unmute yourselves, *6 if you know the answer to that. The question is, again, when a corporation does its banking, does the bank tell the corporation how much money they have in the account the way they did the citizens and the subjects? Or does the corporation put the documents forth, and they even put it on the public record, but put the documents forth and tell the bank how much they have in the account after on the ledger. Who does the telling? Is it the corporation that tells the bank, or does the bank tell the corporation? How much money is in the account? That's a question. If anyone has worked in any of those departments, and you've seen the directions of the paperwork and the currency. Does Walmart ask the bank, how much do we have in our account? Or does Walmart tell the bank, this is what we took in, this is what went out, and this is what's in our account? Recorded. That's something to think about, huh?
Fuck the Moors, fuck Islam, Merry Christmas, USA.
That means corporations were pretending to be the sovereign. The corporations would say, this is what they would open their books for inspection and say, this is what our books say. And the bank would just record it. And another question, a follow-up question to that, and this is telling you the move that we've made. But we have to think about it and know first why we do it that way. When corporations like Walmart and, the grocery stores and all of them, when they do their banking, do they go in? Now, they used to go in. They used to do this in the 70s and a little bit in the 80s. They would have one of the secretaries or somebody to go into the bank and go to the merchant window, and they would have these big old bags of cash and coins and stuff. And this was more so for the small businesses. And then they would hand that over, and the bank would record it and store it and keep it. That way they don't have that on the premises. Well, for major corporations, they didn't go to the teller, and the teller couldn't even look in the system and look at the bank account of Walmart or whatever, because that's not how their banking is done. Their banking is done by ledger, or affidavit in our case. An affidavit is a ledger. And that's how we do our banking, by ledger, affidavit ledger. And we say, okay, this is how much we took in from our trust account. But whose account is it really? The entire state of Morocco. All accounts are wards of the state too. All accounts are wards of the state. Islam nobility. Just as we can barely hear what you're saying. Justice Sharif, did you have a question? Okay, he may have unmuted inadvertently. Okay, so the corporations would tell the bank, okay, we have this much in here, this is what we took in, or this is what we pulled from our trust account, and this is what we paid out, and this is how much we have on our ledger. Make sure your ledger matches our ledger. And then what would the corporations do? How would they spend what was on the ledger? Because, see, that's an important part right there. How do we how do we use what's on our ledger? The same way we put it there. We use it by affidavit. We use it by affidavit. And then the reason we would send that affidavit to, we would notify the bank of what's on our ledger, is so that the bank can talk to any other corporations or companies, etc., in the language that they speak in based on our command in our ledger. And we're gonna continue doing these demonstrations because, see, they're doing exactly what we tell them to do in as much as they have the authority to do so. Okay, but there's limits even to their system when it comes to the errors. And that's another reason why even in our fleet, they couldn't just take over and just do whatever and then do away with us. Okay, they couldn't just get rid of all the heirs because they still needed autographs on those ledgers to prove that we're in consent or assent or whatever with that. If we didn't offer proper rebuttal, so hopefully this is giving you something to think about when it comes to proceeding at the banking piece. Now, I will say this about getting them to acknowledge our sovereign status. We know that they did because, first of all, we have an autograph, some initials from one of the custodians who was previously doing business as manager, but we liened them and all of that. That was all of that was contained in our paperwork. And then we gave delarium. Had to do that. That's a must. We have to give delarium with our affidavit, especially where banking is concerned. Because even corporations were using their own private commercial paper, which to them was their ledger and their stocks and bonds. Okay? So in doing the demonstration, whenever, and this is the final thing that I'll say about what was done and the best way to move forth in banking. When I first placed them on notice, I gave them a total of 36 affidavits in red and all lowercase letters. And it's those affidavits that we've been telling you about. It's the name change, judicial proclamation, copy of my Moorish ID in red and all lowercase letters, a lien on the straw and the social security number, the sovereign living birth affidavit, the Empire State of Morocco document, delarium, currency controller, secretary for sovereign state, what else? Sovereign governor, sovereign lawyer, chief for police, chief executive officer, what else? The Al Moroccan American Exchange list of inherited companies. That's important because that again is all we're doing is showing liquidity and solvency. Okay, and then the fiduciary document, of course, that document goes with everything that we do. And then last week we talked about the Securities and Exchange Exemption Form D affidavit that we did. It's an affidavit. It's not their form. It's an affidavit. Universal Commercial Code lien on the United States Corporation Company, the court action on them, the arrest command on them, the Internal Revenue Service creditor banking code, and I've shown you that previously. So these are many of the termination of all corporate contracts, sovereign security number affidavit, proclamation of trust, and indemnis facier for $100 million in gold-backed Moorish sovereign dollarium. The unum sanctum affidavit. These are all 36 documents, and even then, since then, the Universal Transfers for Minors Act. Because again, the bank accounts are minors that are being taken by the state. Very, very straightforward. Very straightforward. They're minors that are being taken by the state. So it's the same way as them coming in and taking somebody's children, calling them minors, but really calling the parents minors and making the children wards of the state. It's the same thing. Very same process. Except now we've taken back that which rightfully belongs to us. And we're fiduciaries of it. Not authorized representatives, because no one represents the board. We present ourselves. And we don't have to represent anyone else. We assist, but we don't represent. So it's all in the language. But we can be the fiduciary for any resource on this land. Any of them. So the day before that we gave these documents to the bank, the account said one thing. I think it had something like 20 cents in there. Because it's a fiat account. I don't use it. And it's not really a fiat account because we've terminated all corporate contracts. But we needed to do something with it. We needed to turn it into a natural resource. So the day after I gave them the document, and they initialed for them, receipt of, and the dollarium was sitting right there on top of the document, and they looked at it and they were like, oh, okay. The day after, the account said something completely different. But it didn't quite, they can't reflect unless we tell them what's in there, they can only reflect what they see and what they know to be according to their records and the status of the account. Now, all bank accounts, and I want to thank the Moors for this information because one of the brothers sent me this information a few weeks back, maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks back. But it's something, it seems minor, but it's major because of the language. Whenever we do deposits on these wards of the state accounts, wards of the Empire State of Morocco accounts, it is still called a special status deposit because even the account, the wards of the state have a status. Special status deposit. That's what it's called. Special status deposits and special status accounts. What's the status? It's the status of the state that is presenting it. And again, when you lien the United States Corporation Company, that was pretending to be the state and making on everything ward, lien them, put them in debt, lien everybody, lien the bank, lien the one doing business, the CEO, because we're the real CEOs. Then the real CEOs get to speak. Remember, in the news, they would always talk about how, the corporations were running everything. The corporations were running, quote unquote, Congress, and the corporations are running the banks and telling the banks what to do and lobbying all the laws, making the laws and all of this and that, which is just a bunch of garbage. But they were saying that because the one with the highest status gets to make the law. And our job, it's our responsibility to make the law. It's our responsibility. So now when we're talking about more sovereign delirium even, that is each delirium is a public act, record, and judicial proceeding because it comes with affidavit. And I'll say this, and then the floor is open, by the way, to for those who may want to who have any wisdom or questions or anything like that. When I was growing up, I used to watch my mother, because my mother and father were both Christian ministers. They had their own church. And the church is still there, and they have 40 acres of land there. And I used to work in the office with my mother when she would take the offerings from the services and count everything up, her and whoever was helping her with that, and count and add everything up and bundle it all together, and all the checks that came in, I mean, stacks and stacks of checks that came in, and I would watch them take that and bundle it up and I would go with her and take it, occasionally, and take it to the bank. And sometimes she would go through the drive-through with some of it, and then if it was an unusually, like if it was a Sunday, it would be especially around the first of the month, and that's how those things work. We know that. Around the first of the month, things would be a little higher, quantities would be higher, and so she would go into the merchant window. And whenever they did that, they would give her a receipt for whatever was on her paper. In other words, she was telling them what was in the account, not the other way around. Would they verify it? Yes. Sometimes they would sit there, she would sit there, and they would say, okay, it's inventory time for us, so we're going to audit this deposit that you sent. And whenever they would audit the deposit, what she said it was had to match what was on her paper, and then they would say, okay, everything adds up, you're good to go. And then they would make sure that the account said that. So they would do spot checks. But 98% of the time, she was telling them what was in the account, not the other way around. They used her papers and her documentation. And it's the same way with corporations. The corporations were telling the banks what's in there, not the other way around. And for us, it's the same way. We can prove what's in our account. And what did we do? We proved it by giving them that amount and saying, this is what's in the account. Make sure the accounts reflect that. So here's your delirium. You can put that with your ledger as proof. It was embossed with the right red thumbprint and the autograph, etc. Because I emboss with my embosser each delirium that I send out. And then we also notified the Securities and Exchange Commission. Just notify them. That's all we needed to do, notify them competently. We notified the Library of Congress, the quote-unquote attorney general, the Secretary of State, and I have a whole list of them that we notified of what we're doing. And they're all in subject status, so that's what notification is for, to let them know, okay, this responsibility, the state has taken that responsibility where we're concerned. Competently. And then we took it to the Superior Court. And we just handed it to them and recorded who took it, who accepted the diallarium and the document, so that they can put it on their ledger as well. Well, if you accept it and don't send it back, that means that it is a lawful action that must be honored in every state. And they're not going to rebut it simply because they're subjects on our land. Courts and policy enforcers and all of that is subject to the board. With that being said, are there any questions about any of the things that we have put forth today? Hopefully this adds some other research and development to your demonstration, because that's what we're hoping to do, is just continue the thinking process and the demonstration process on how we're getting things done. Are there any questions, comments, etc.? You can star 6 to unmute. Islam. With that being said, I have nothing further. We will meet again next week. And in the interim, we're going to continue moving forward and publishing the demonstrations as we do them, and the results of those demonstrations as well. Everything is going exactly as planned, and we're excited about all of that. So if there's any assistance that we can provide to any of you, we are here for you. Peace and grand rising to the sovereign, original, indigenous, natural, divine.
Grand rising.
Peace and love, heirs. Grand rising.
Grand rising.
Islam.
Peace and love.
Islam.
Grand rising.
Grand rising.
Grand rising.
Grand rising.
Islam. Grand rising, Empress. You're welcome, Empress.
Peace and love to the Moors.
Islam. Grand rising.
John rising.
Islam. And we will disconnect the call and not disconnect our energy, though.
Islam.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Islam. Islam mobility.